Welcome back, TAPVR folk. So, resuming where I left off in the last video, I want to show you a PlayerGrab script, which I already wrote. But I guess we should probably kind of sort of write it here in the video so I can explain it line by line. So I think I double clicked it. So that's what it's going to look like. And but I guess we're going to write a new one. So what we'll do, we're going to select our, I'll show you the script. Here's the script. You can freeze frame on this and like copy it. But since I'm going through the trouble of making this video, we'll type it in. But if you are just going to copy, actually I'll have to figure out a way to provide you the text files so you can download them. But there's only a few lines. But if you are typing it in, and a lot of times when people type in their own version of this stuff, of any script, you gotta, and I know it's a broken record at this point, me repeating myself, but just make sure that the name of the class, and that by that I mean this line up here, make sure that when it says public class and the name of the class, and then colon mono behavior, make sure that that name after class is exactly the same as the name of the file, except the name of the file will be the class name with a .cs, where here there's no .cs. Got it? Got it. So we're gonna, and I'm gonna move my Ethan guy. So I guess I already made a copy of the scene from last time where we brought in our third-person controller. And I'm going to add a component. And since there's already a file called PlayerGrab, I have to name it something else. So I'll just call it PlayerGrab2. Now, you can just type the name of the script that you're going to write as long as it doesn't exist. It'll automatically assume you're creating a new script. So then I can go to New Script, click that. The name will already be there, and I'll click Create and Add. And it takes it a second to kind of like fill in this area. And there it is. Just double click that. So here we are. This is our brand new script. And I'm going to be referring to the other one every now and then. So here we are looking at the other version of it. And what I did was I started with a bool. So I'm just going to copy and paste that line. No, that's too lazy. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to type public because I want this to be visible in the inspector. Bool. And I called it isGrab. And I set it to true, I guess. Or false. No, it's false by default. I'm gonna probably get rid of the start, or I'll keep it. I'll keep it. So in update, what we're gonna do is we want to use the input manager, and we're gonna look for a key press of the G key. So we're gonna say if, in parentheses, input dot get key down with another parentheses, and then in that parentheses key code dot space, no, dot G. So when somebody's pressing the G key, Now brackets. This is what we're going to do if somebody's pressing the G key. We're going to set isGrab is equal to true. And then down here we're going to say else, and then more brackets, isGrab equals false. I want to make sure it works. So I've saved it. I hit Control S to save it. I'm going to Alt Tab back to Unity. For some reason I have trouble saying that word. And it looks like it compiled. So I'm going to hit play. And currently my third person controller is selected over here, which is why my inspector is showing all this information, including this new script we wrote, which has this isGrab thing. So if I'm in my scene window, and by in the scene I mean I think the mouse has to be over it, so that way it registers when I hit the G key. So I'm going to say, when I hit the G key, I'm going to say I am hitting the G key. Which I am doing, but it's behaving really strangely. So something's clearly wrong, because I'm looking down here at my inspector and I'm seeing isGrab is off, and when I hit G, it doesn't really go on and off the way I'm expecting it to. So, got it. This was a mistake. Input.getKey. Control S, and I'll explain in a minute. First I have to check it. So if you look down in the inspector, I'm going to press G and let go. G and let go. And that's how I know it's responding to my key press. I'm pressing it, I'm not pressing. Pressing it, not pressing it. I'm like holding it down and I'm letting go. So if you look there, I mean, it's responding the way you expect it to. It's pretty fast. Well, it's not that fast. Okay. I think it's fast enough. Anyway, let me explain. So GetKey tells you that the key is pressed or being pressed. GetKeyDown is precisely the moment that the key is pressed down, when it's up and goes down. Just at that one frame, that's when it detects a GetKeyDown. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted to actually grab onto an object and hold onto it while the key is down. And that's why I want to use GetKey. Because that way it's like turning on a magnet on and off based on when your finger is pressed. So that it always knows to keep power going to that magnet when the key is down. It's hard to explain, but it's easy to see. And that's why we have that visual for the isGrab thing down there. So one more time, when I press play, and if you look at the isGrab thing over in the bottom, and when I hold down the G key, it's like that. When I let go, it turns off. Got it? Got it. Good. And I'm going to quickly flip back to the pre-written script. And now I see that that's how I wrote it. And I got to tell you, it's valuable for me to make mistakes like this because we learn more about how this stuff works. I see that I used different indentation conventions here. All in one script, I used 2 different indentation conventions, and that's bad. So might as well clean that up while I'm here. So what did I do? I added all this extra stuff down here, and that's interesting. But we don't have to worry about that just yet. So the next thing I did was create this grabbing and letting go sort of mechanic, which uses this thing. It's called a fixed joint. So we're going to make a private fixed joint and call it FJ. So back in our script that we're currently typing. I'm going to make it a private. So to reiterate, private just means that it's a variable that's only accessed within the script because it's not needed anywhere else. Because if we made it public and we allowed other scripts to mess with it, it would be really hard for us to debug it if we were allowing other scripts to mess with other scripts. So we're going to say private fixed joint, that's capital F, capital J, and we're going to call it FJ, which is 2 lowercase letters, and we're just going to close that semicolon. I guess we're going to need our trigger event. So we're going to say, so usually what I do when I need an, basically we want, okay, so this is going to require several things. We're going to need a trigger on our character. So I'm going to add that. So I'm going to, before we're done with this, I'm just going to save it, Control S, and it made a weird sound. Okay, anyway, back on our third-person controller, what I want is a trigger that when a collider intersects this trigger, it'll try to grab that thing that intersected it. So like if it gets close to the tea kettle, and the tea kettle is going to basically enter this trigger. So to reiterate, trigger is basically a collider, but it's made into a trigger, which means it detects a collision, but it doesn't behave like a collider. It's not going to like bump it and knock it away. So it sort of doesn't obey physics, but because it's a physics object, it can sense other physics objects that are entering it or colliding with it. That's hard to explain, but I think you guys understand. Of course you do. So I'm going to click Add Component, Box Collider, and now this is the most important part of it, where it's where my mouse is, the new box collider exists. Now I'm going to click Is Trigger, so make sure that's checked. And then the second most important thing is when you look over in my scene, this new box appeared. That's my new box collider that's now a trigger. So I'm going to want to move it, but you can't just like move it using the normal move tools, because that'll move the whole character. We need to move it using these little XYZ coordinates down here, which is for the center of the box, and it's relative to the transform that it's attached to. So these are just confusing sounding words. It doesn't matter whether you understand it or not. I'm just going to take the Y value here, and you can do two things. You can type in a number. I like the number 1. It puts it up kind of like at waist height. Or you can use, now when you hover the mouse over the Y there, it turns into these 2 arrows. And then if you left click it and drag, you can kind of visually move it up and down. So maybe I'll let it come down just a little bit. So now we have a trigger. I'm going to Control S to save my scene and then go back to my script. So now that we have a trigger, we can use a thing called OnTriggerEnter or OnTriggerStay. Now, let me see which one I used in my other script. I used OnTriggerStay. So let me explain why we would use that. When another collider enters your trigger, right at the moment it enters it, that runs the event OnTriggerEnter. So if you wanted it to grab onto something right when it enters it, that might work. But then in the following frame, it's going to say, oh, it hasn't entered it because it entered it the previous frame. So it might let go of it because it doesn't care anymore. But I want it to say, as long as it's occupying the trigger, it can be held onto. So that's why we're using OnTriggerStay. So I'm going to paste this line in and reformat it a little. Give it some curly brackets. And what OnTriggerStay does, well, it requires a collider. And that's the same type of collider that is like the box collider, basically, or capsule collider or mesh collider. These are things that you've seen on your models in the on your game objects. So so what are we doing? I have to look at the other one. Got it. Basically, we're going to say if the G key is being held down, we can do stuff with this. So we'll type that in. So I'm going to tab over and say if, and since we have that Boolean, we're going to use that. If is grab, and we don't have to say equals true or anything like that, because that's how Booleans work. They're either true or false. So if is grab, here's the thing. We're going to have to say if, no. We're just going to have to say fj, which is our fixed joint, is equal to, hold on, I'm gonna check the other script. I'm gonna do it the way I've been saying, even though it looks different in that script, because this is like a more organic way of writing it, and it might make sense. Anyway, I'm gonna say fj is equal to, so we're gonna take our game object, which is the one that we're attached to, which is currently the third-person controller object. We're going to say dot add component, and in less-than sign, we're going to type fixed joint, and then greater than sign, and then the two parentheses. Now it's going to create the fixed joint, but we're also going to say, now with that fixed joint fj dot connected body. Now this needs to be a rigid body. We're going to say it's equal to, and our collider is called col, C-O-L. So we're going to say we need the rigid body that's attached to that collider. So I think I can type col dot get component, I might be wrong by the way, rigid body, and you'll see if I'm wrong when we look at that other script. Yeah, okay, maybe I was wrong. I mean, sometimes they allow for this shorthand, but what I'm going to say is call dot game object dot get component. So what this means is we want to get the component of the rigid body component that's attached to the game object that's attached to our collider, or that's associated with it. So actually the game object is kind of the parent of this collider, if you want to get technical. So that should grab it, but we haven't done anything about letting go of it. But I'm going to save this code and press play, and then run him around, holding down the G key. It works. But now if I let go of the G key, he's still grabbing it. So we're gonna have to add that. So to let go of a thing, down here where we said is grab equals false, we could say if our fixed joint, basically we're gonna say not equal. So this exclamation point is also, it also means not, which is like the opposite of. So if fj is not equal to null, which is like nothing, then we want to get rid of it. And we want to check to see if it's null first, because that's just a way to be kind to the computer, to make sure something exists before we try to destroy it. It sounds weird, but that's how computers work. That's how a lot of code works. So we're going to say, literally, destroy, and in parentheses, fj. And I'm going to save this and see if it works. Or maybe I'll check my other file. Yeah, it looks about the same. Excellent. Okay, and now my kettle's getting away from me. I keep calling it a kettle, but whoa, I definitely did something wrong because it is slow. What did I do wrong? Oh, that's easy. So here where I say OnTriggerStay, oh, that's terrible. I'm giving you really bad code. So, well, no, it's a learning experience for all of us. So we can't just, whenever the trigger is detecting this collider, we can't just keep saying add another component, it's a fixed joint. We really have to see if it needs to be created. If it's already like held on by a fixed joint, basically we're creating a joint between the character and the teapot or whatever it is. If it's already got this joint that's holding it there, then we don't need to create any more joints. But we have been creating more and more and more joints accidentally. And let me see if that's visually apparent here. So if I press play and I pick up my teapot, come on, GKey. Oh no! Looks like I got stuck to my AI. But let's have a look at this thing. Look at that. There's fixed joint, fixed joint, fixed joint. There's lots of them. So I'm scrolling down and I've made like a million fixed joints and I'm just killing the computer. So in my OnTriggerStay, so when the collider is within grasp of this trigger, we're going to say, sure, even though you're holding down the G key, we're not going to create this joint unless we need to. So we're going to say if isGrab, and then we're going to use and, which is 2 ampersands. That's what these squiggly lines are, squiggly symbols are called, ampersands, and it means and. I think everyone knows it means and, but it's got a weird name. So if isGrab and fj is equals null. So that means if fj is not assigned, if it's empty, then we can create this fixed joint. So that's why we keep the fj fixed joint variable up here, so that we can keep track of it and know when it's there or not. So now I go back, hit play, and run around and try to chase down that teapot. Oh, I keep running into like other colliders that I grab onto, and because I've grabbed onto them, so I'm going to let go of the G key and it drops it, hold the G key and it runs with it. Now what's been happening is sometimes I run near like a box and I hit G and now I can't run. It's because I'm grabbing onto that box, that white box there. So that's another sort of buggy thing I should fix. So that's probably why this PlayerGrab script over here has so much stuff in it. So that's why this line is here, which I'm just going to copy and paste because I'm cheating right now because I'm in a rush. So I know the two scripts look different, but they have the same behavior. So I'm going to say and as long as our collider is attached to a game object that has our rigid body that's not equal to null, that means that the rigid body exists. So that means as long as it's a thing that's like reacting to physics and it's kind of freely rolling around in the scene, then we can grab it. Because if it's like those boxes that are like static and part of the ground, we don't want to grab that, because if we grab onto it, we're not moving. So I'm going to save this. Now if I hold down G, I'm not getting stuck to, oh wait, hold on, gotta let go of the red teapot. So G key doesn't really get caught up on these, let's call them, they look like counters at the Apple store. Yeah, the G key no longer gets me stuck, but it will get me stuck to this guy. But it looks like I can grab him and drag him around, so that's good. Alright, so now I can grab this kettle and drop it. I don't know why I keep calling it a kettle, because I don't think it's a kettle, it's a teapot. So basically, we've written a PlayerGrab script, but we want to take it one step further. So here's what we're going to do. I'm actually going to copy and paste this and bring it over here. But I'm going to explain what we're doing. And now this is the most important thing. The order that you type this in is really important. In other words, it has to be up here before we create the fixed joint. What we're doing is we're adding these 3 lines of code. What these 3 lines of code are doing, it creates this vector, which is just 3 numbers that represent something. In this case, it's the position of an object. We're going to take this vector 3, it's a 3 because it's 3 dimensions, x, y, and z. We're going to say pos, which is really the position, but I'm lazy, so I type pos. We're going to say POS is equal to the position of the transform that's attached to the game object that's associated with this collider that we've bumped into. So now we get the position of the thing, and we're going to add to the y-axis, we're going to add 1. So we're making it 1 meter higher than it currently is at. And then we're going to reassign the position to where we got it from. This collider, game object, transform position. We're reassigning it to that. So we're basically taking this thing that bumped into us, and while we're holding down the G key, we're going to lift it up and then grab onto it. So if we grabbed it and then tried to lift it, it wouldn't go anywhere because we're grabbing it too hard. Basically, that's how that works. And the reason we're doing that, the reason I got this idea, was in case you want to develop a kind of game mechanic. Whoops. There's my teapot. Now that's funny. It's not lifting it up. So let's see what I did wrong. I forgot to save. Control S. Alt tab back. And before I play, I want to get rid of this red kettle that we keep dragging around. And I'm just going to make a bunch of these because I want more things to grab onto. So I'm Control D, dragging. Control D, drag. While it's selected, Control D duplicates it and dragging it and pressing play. Lots of teapots. And now I'm running around and I'm gonna hold down the G key, and it lifts it up. And the reason I decided to do this was because Sabrina was asking me, like, if there's a way to make our character lift like a block up so that we could like stack blocks. And I know it's not really what she had in mind. You know, I think she wanted it to like be an animated thing where you actually reach out and grab something and lift it. But it sort of solved that problem, but at the same time, it's solving another thing, which is a sneaky way of introducing a concept of a grab mechanic, which is what we're going to use in a VR game, basically. Because VR is so much more awesome when you have your hand controller and you can reach out and grab something and pick it up and toss it. Okay, so that's it. That's our script. I'm going to hit save here. Here's the script if you want to copy it. You know, you can ignore these lines, these commented out lines. You don't even have to have the start thing because it's not doing anything. Make it all nice and small and neat. If you want, you can put in comments by using 2 forward slashes, and you could say this, hold down G key to grab. It's these comments are little pieces of, they're not really code, they're just things that you would add to your code to remind you what you were intending to do. Because sometimes the code looks like gibberish and you want to remind yourself, basically remind yourself something you've learned. So usually I fill up my scripts with lots of comments all over the place. So this is, you could freeze frame this, copy it down if you want. Let me quickly shift back to the other version of it. Yeah, it's almost identical. It's actually a little better than the other version now, mainly because this if statement is all in one line, where I had it in 2 lines before. And I'm exhausted. I'm losing my voice. So that's it for this video. And hope you enjoyed this show. Bye.